That day, my friend Dwayne and I were heading toward the old, crumbling, and nearly forgotten charity hospital in New Orleans. I'm Marcus, and I shoot documentaries at abandoned locations. The hospital had been shut down for 17 years after Hurricane Katrina, but according to stories, something inside those walls still remained, something that never really died. We had already heard rumors that some rooms still had lights flickering late at night, even though the building had no power. It sounded weird, sure, but for me, that was gold, because where there's mystery, there's real content. We planned to enter the hospital at 10 a.m. so we could capture everything clearly in daylight. From the outside, the building looked like it was collapsing on itself, broken windows, damp-stained walls, and wild overgrowth swallowing the structure. As soon as we pushed the door open, a strong, sickening smell of old medicine and dust hit our faces. It was the kind of smell that makes you think twice before breathing in. Inside, broken stretchers, torn gowns, blood-stained bandages, and rusted bedrolls were scattered across the floor. Each item felt like an unfinished story frozen in time. We started from the ground floor and slowly worked our way up, documenting the first 3 levels. Everything was being captured on camera, but something else was getting captured in my gut, a quiet sense of dread that got heavier with every step. By the time we reached the 3rd floor, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us. I tried to ignore it, but when I checked the playback, one frame showed a blurry shadow behind us, not fully clear, not fully hidden either, but enough to know someone was there. I told Dwayne, but he brushed it off with a laugh, probably just a pigeon's shadow. But I knew that wasn't a pigeon. Going up to the 4th floor felt like walking into the climax of a horror film. The operating room up there had the worst reputation. We slowly opened the door, and inside, the surgical table still stood like it was waiting for someone. Old surgical tools were rusting away. Lights dangled loosely from the ceiling. But one thing really got us. Right in the center of the room, a single light was faintly flickering, like the dying pulse of a past that wasn't ready to let go. The problem was there was no power supply in the entire hospital. Dwayne muttered, "Must be some backup battery. Or maybe someone hooked it up recently." But even he didn't sound confident. It was like trying to explain the dark with your eyes closed, pretending there's nothing there. We set up the camera and started shooting. I stood near the table while Dwayne checked the equipment, when suddenly, a loud crash echoed. A surgical tray had fallen to the floor, but it was just us in the room. The sound was sharp, deliberate, like someone threw it. We froze. I looked around but saw nothing. Dwayne forced a nervous laugh and said, "Maybe it just slipped ... or rolled off ... But his voice didn't believe it either. A little later, he went downstairs to grab spare batteries, leaving me alone in the operating room. The silence of that space began crawling into me. Something was there, but it made no sound. I placed the camera on the tripod and began taking panning shots. While reviewing a few frames, I noticed something off in one of the corners. Far back, a figure stood completely still. A man in a surgical mask. His body didn't move. His eyes stared directly into the lens. He wore gloves and just stood there. I immediately lowered the camera and looked up, but there was no one in the room. I tried to convince myself it was a reflection or maybe a glitch. But deep down I knew what I saw. When Dwayne came back, I showed him the footage. He said, "It's probably just a glitch, bro. Don't worry." But I saw something flicker in his face, something like fear, quickly covered up with a forced laugh. For me, this wasn't just some tech error or random reflection. I had felt something in that room, a stare, a silence, a pressure. Something that clung to your skin and stayed, even after you walked out the door. We left the building, but my mind was stuck on one question. If no one else was in that hospital, then who the hell was in that footage? And if someone was in there, where had they been hiding? That night, back in my room, I watched the footage again, slowed it down, frame by frame. And there he was, that man in the surgical mask, looking right at me. His eyes had a faint glow, and the moment the next frame came in, he was gone. I don't know what that was. A ghost? A hallucination? Or something worse? But one thing I know for sure, Charity Hospital isn't just an abandoned building. Something's still awake inside. And it watches you through the lens. I don't know why we decided to go back there. Maybe it was curiosity, probably the most dangerous thing humans have. After our first daytime shoot inside Charity Hospital, I couldn't sleep all night. That single frame kept replaying in my head. A man who looked like a doctor, wearing a surgical mask, appeared for one moment in the camera, and vanished. In the very next frame, Dwayne told me it was just a glitch, but deep down, something told me there was still something left to uncover inside that place. So around 10 p.m. the next night, we returned, this time fully prepared with 2 infrared cameras, a high-sensitivity mic, and extra flashlights. But the moment we stepped through that old, rusted gate, I felt like the building already knew we were coming. The entire structure was wrapped in a strange silence, but even within that silence, something felt present. Like the walls were watching. U.S. While climbing the stairs, the air felt unnaturally still, and every step made the floor creak like it was trying to warn us. Or maybe stop us. As soon as we reached the 4th floor, the hallway lights began turning on one by one on their own. And this was a hospital that hadn't had electricity in over 17 years. I froze, my fingers were on the record button, but my hand was shaking. "Did you see that?" I whispered to Dwayne. He nodded slowly, but didn't say a word. I lifted the camera and started recording, but every few seconds, the footage would glitch like some kind of magnetic interference was messing with it. While standing at the end of the hallway, I turned on the mic, and after a few minutes of recording, we captured a very faint whisper. "Next patient, please." The voice was clinical, cold like it came from inside a surgical mask. There was no emotion in it, just a robotic process. We looked at each other, and for the first time, I saw fear in Dwayne's eyes. "We need to get the hell out of here," he said, and we started heading down without filming anything else. But the way back wasn't how we remembered it. On every floor, the lights would flicker on, then off again. The posters on the walls had changed. Where there were once motivational slogans, now there were faded warnings like "isolation in progress" and "no visitors allowed beyond this point." I clearly remembered a wheelchair lying on its side near a corner earlier, but now it was upright, placed right in the middle of the hallway, as if someone had moved it. And these weren't illusions, these were real, noticeable changes. As we reached the 2nd floor, we started hearing strange noises, drip machines beeping, the hum of a suction device, the metallic click of surgical scissors, all echoing in a place where no surgeries were being performed. We couldn't figure out where the sounds were coming from, but we followed them to what looked like an old IQ Ward 1 that used to be on the 3rd floor, but somehow was now down here. As we walked down the hallway, I suddenly saw a long shadow pass across from the other side, but it had no legs. I quickly turned the camera toward it, but there was nothing there. Just an empty corridor and flickering light. My breathing got heavier, and Dwayne was now a few steps ahead of me. As we passed by an old operating room, the heavy metal door behind us suddenly slammed shut with a loud bang. We froze. Turned around, no one there. "This place is not normal, man," Dwayne whispered. We started running. But something strange was happening. The hallway seemed to stretch longer and longer. The wall colors began shifting, and where the staircase should have been, there was now just another door. We somehow found a staircase and started going down. But when we were supposed to reach the ground floor, we ended up on the 3rd floor again. I tried looking out one of the hallway windows, but there was nothing outside. Just a black void with no shapes, no depth. That's when we finally understood this building wasn't static anymore. It was playing with us, manipulating our sense of direction, our memories, even our fear. Charity Hospital wasn't just a place, it had become an entity. And it decided who gets out and who doesn't. And that night, inside that operating room, whatever we saw was a clear sign. We weren't just making a documentary. We had unknowingly become a part of one. A film that's still rolling. And the next scene, it's ours to play. That night felt like a nightmare. But the difference was, we couldn't wake up from it. It had been over an hour since Dwayne and I had entered the hospital, but every time we tried to head down, we'd end up back where we started, sometimes in the burnt hallway on the 3rd floor, sometimes outside that flickering light operating room on the 4th. Charity Hospital wasn't the same building we walked into earlier. Doors that were open were now sealed shut. Some of the walls had changed position, like the building was adjusting itself around us. A single thought echoed in my mind: we're no longer in the same charity hospital we entered. I had this habit of checking my watch frequently, and when I noticed it had been stuck at 2:13 a.m. for the last 20 minutes, my heart nearly stopped. I looked over at Dwayne. His face was as pale as the dark hallway we were standing in. My camera kept glitching every 5 minutes, and in between the static, there was this faint screaming sound, soft at first, then growing louder until it would suddenly cut out. Dwayne looked at me and whispered, "I saw someone. He was in a surgical gown, and he had no eyes. Just black holes." That was the first time a chill ran through my entire body, because Dwayne never got scared. Like that dot, we ran into an old room, probably used to be the records room. Dust-covered shelves lined with old VCR tapes. One black labeled tape had the date 2005 on it, the same year Hurricane Katrina hit. We popped it into a dusty player. The screen showed shaky footage, patients being wheeled around on stretchers, nurses yelling, total chaos. Then, in one frame, a patient looked directly into the camera. Something about his eyes hit me hard. And in the very next frame, I saw myself walking through that hallway. Me. Same jacket, same camera, same expression. I dropped to the cold floor, frozen. Dwayne paused the screen, but I kept mumbling the same thing. How is this possible? How can I be in a tape from 2005? My voice trembled and my head was spinning. Dwayne put a hand on my shoulder and said, "We're not alone, Marcus." And maybe we never were. We started running. Door handles were rattling across the floor. The smell of burnt wires filled the air, and the hallway felt heavy, so heavy, it was hard to breathe. But the stairs were gone. Every door was locked, and shadowy figures darted across the walls. My camera battery was nearly dead, but I kept recording. I knew if we made it out, this footage would be the only proof. Then, everything went blank. The last thing I remember was hearing a voice, slow, almost soothing. "Lie down. It's time for your procedure." And then, total darkness. I woke up the next morning, sitting in a parking lot, about 100 meters from the hospital. My mind was numb, clothes dirty, burn marks on my hands, and my camera resting in my lap but with a black screen. Dwayne was gone. I called the cops first. They searched the entire building, but found no body, no signs of struggle, no evidence anyone had been there. The CCTVs weren't working, and the main gate was locked untouched. Officially, no one had entered that place, but I had something, the final footage. It's still on my laptop, stored in an encrypted folder. I've never shown it to anyone, because I know if someone watches it, something starts following them. I don't talk about Dwayne anymore. For me, he's just gone. I blame myself. I was the one who dragged him into that building. But the footage, its last frame, shows me lying on the operating table, and behind the camera, there's someone else standing, the doctor. He's staring straight into the lens. His eyes are even darker now, and his lips are moving, like he's saying, "Next." And yeah, I made one mistake. I watched the video again. Since then, every time I walk down a dark hospital corridor, I feel like someone in a surgical mask is staring at me. And he never blinks. It was exactly 6 p.m. when the two of us, me and my boyfriend Noah, started walking down that old, forgotten path in Pennsylvania that would lead us to Forest Hills State Hospital. My name is Ashley, and I'm a photography student. Noah's obsessed with exploring abandoned, creepy places. We actually met on a Reddit forum for urban explorers, and that's where our friendship and later our relationship started. One thing we both shared was a love for chasing fear. Noah craved the thrill, and I was drawn to the eerie, suffocating vibe of old mental asylums, places that feel like they're hiding something behind every wall. For weeks we'd been researching this place called Forest Hills, an old mental hospital built in the 1930s and shut down in 1994 with no official reason. That's what bugged me the most. How could such a huge facility suddenly close down without explanation? Some blogs said patients bashed their heads into walls, some gouged out their eyes, others screamed to death in the OR with no doctor in sight. Noah said it was all exaggerated, but for me, it only made the place more magnetic. When we asked a local for directions, he flat out refused. That place is still alive. Don't go there at night. Their voices still echo. Noah laughed and looked at me. Scare tactic. Locals always say that. So we went completely unaware of what we were walking into. The forest trail wasn't easy. The trees were covered in thick moss, like old wounds. The trail had faded, and we had to rely on a compass. About 30 minutes in, we spotted a rusted wooden gate with faded iron letters that read, "Forest Hills, welcome to healing." A cold wind hit our faces just standing there, even though the weather was warm. As we stepped inside, darkness and silence greeted us first. The building stood 3 stories tall, broken windows, 4 tubes hanging in the breeze from some of them, and a surgical mask swaying by the front door, like someone had just worn it. I turned on my flashlight, and Noah got the camera ready. We stepped in slowly. The smell hit us right away, a mix of old medicine, moisture, and something rotten that made the air feel toxic. The hallway inside was long and empty, but it felt like something had just quietly heard our footsteps. The walls were lined with torn paintings, faces of children smeared in red. One painting showed a kid terrified of a syringe, while the doctor looked like a monster, huge eyes, sharp teeth. It gave me chills. Noah muttered, "Some crazy patient probably painted these." But even his voice didn't carry the confidence he had earlier in the woods. As we turned a corner in the hallway, we saw an old wheelchair. The moment our flashlight hit it, it moved slightly. There was no wind. We both froze. I glanced at Noah. His eyes were still fixed on the chair. Minutes later, we entered another corridor, where what looked like blood-streaked lines had been dragged across the walls with fingers. Some streaks spelled out kids' names: Eli, Grace, Tom, but a few of the names showed up blurry on camera, like something didn't want them seen. Suddenly, Noah stopped and looked behind him. "Did you feel that?" he asked. Someone just breathed on my neck. I scanned the hallway with my light. "Noah, there's no one here." But his breathing was heavy now. "Ashley, I swear, someone was there." That's when I saw it too, on the wall beside us. Our shadows, and a third one. It was taller than us, its body strangely shaped, like the neck was twisted and the arms were too long. And slowly, that shadow faded. Like smoke. We had reached the back wing of the building, the old psychiatric ward. Noah pointed his flashlight toward a locked ward door, and I saw him, a man. He was just standing there, wearing a filthy gown. Wide, unblinking eyes and a frozen expression. Noah froze too. His flashlight almost slipped from his hand. "Ashley," he whispered. I turned toward him. "What?" "Say something." But the man just stared at us, motionless, expressionless. And then our lights went out, pitch black. I still believe that man was standing just inches from us. There was no sound, yet the silence screamed louder than anything else. It said things we didn't yet understand. But after that day, I know one thing for sure. The walls of Forest Hills still hide someone's screams. The moment our flashlight went out, it felt like the soul of that building had suddenly awakened. We couldn't see a thing in the darkness, but I could clearly hear it. Footsteps from the floor above, light but fast. Like someone was running barefoot. My breathing was sharp, and my heartbeat was pounding so loud it felt like it echoed off the walls of the hallway. Noah softly called my name. "Ashley, where are you?" I pulled out my emergency flashlight from my pocket and searched for his face in the beam. He was just as terrified as I was. We looked at each other, and in that silence, we both knew this wasn't just some fun little adventure anymore. This place was pulling us in. We decided to head upstairs. Maybe we'd find a way out. The second floor was in even worse shape: water dripping from the ceiling, cracks in the walls, and the thick, musty smell of rot in every corner. In one of the rooms, scattered medical files were laying on the floor. We started reading them out of curiosity. One patient file said, "The walls are breathing." Another read, "Children cry in the vents." But the most disturbing line was, "The doctor watches me sleep." It didn't feel like hallucinations. It felt like these things still existed there. Just out of full view. In the corner of a large room, there was an old bookshelf. When Noah pulled it aside, it revealed a narrow staircase leading down to the basement. As we started down, my breathing grew heavier. The moment we reached the bottom, it felt like we had entered another world. So much humidity that water was dripping off the walls, and the stench of mold was unbearable. We came across an old electroshock therapy room machine still in place, wires hanging from the walls, and a rusted stretcher in the corner. Suddenly, the metal gate behind us slammed shut. Noah tried to open it, but it was completely jammed. We were now trapped in the basement. Then we heard a knock, 3 clear taps, like someone knocked directly on the wall. Noah swung the flashlight in that direction, but no one was there. I froze. My flashlight slowly swept toward an old therapy room, and I saw a shadow. Someone was sitting there, head buried in their knees, body trembling. Despite the fear, I started opening the door. But when it was fully open, the room was empty, except for an old, torn straitjacket on the floor. Like someone had just taken it off moments ago. That's when Noah grabbed my wrist, his hand ice cold. He said, "Ashley." I heard my mom's voice. I froze for a second. His mom lived 300 miles away. "She was calling me from that room," he said, his face blank like he was sleepwalking. "They want me to stay." I said, "I'm one of them now." That's when I realized Noah was either hallucinating or seeing something. I couldn't. We tried to find a way out of the basement, but every hallway just led us back to the same place. ICU Ward 7. The same broken IV stands, the same blood-stained walls. The layout had changed, like the building was rearranging itself to trap us. Then I saw something written in blood on the wall. "You checked in. No checkouts." A cold chill ran down my spine. We were completely lost now. Suddenly, a door that had been locked this whole time slowly creaked open. Its sound echoed down the hallway. Noah and I cautiously moved toward it. The room inside was small, with just a single metal bed. A white sheet covered it, but it was rising and falling slightly, like someone underneath was breathing. Noah pointed the flashlight at it, and that moment became the most terrifying of my life. Under the sheet was the same man we had seen earlier in the hallway, but now we could see his face clearly, huge, lifeless eyes, and a terrifying grin, the kind that looked like someone smiling through pain. At that moment, it felt like all the light, sound, and air had been sucked out of the room. It was just us, and him staring at us without blinking. The building wasn't the same anymore, not like it was just a few hours earlier. Both Noah and I could feel it clearly. The hallway's shape had changed. Rooms weren't where they used to be, and outside the windows, there were no trees or night sky anymore. Just a deep black void. It was like nothing existed outside anymore. Doors that were once open were now shut, and the closed ones opened into rooms that never used to be there. Noah said, "This building is playing with us. It knows we're here." I stayed quiet, because I had nothing to say. I just wanted it all to be over. We walked into a room with an old stretcher. I told Noah I felt dizzy, and before I could say anything else, my vision went dark. I'm not sure if he even heard my voice before I collapsed, but just before everything went black, I heard a voice, "Lie down. Treatment starts now." And I'm sure that wasn't Noah's voice. Noah tried to help me up, but he said it felt like something invisible had grabbed him, something strong, holding him back. That's when he noticed a small tape recorder on the wall, an old one, maybe from the 90s. When he hit play, a deep voice came through, sounded like a doctor, but something was wrong with it. Like there was another voice speaking underneath. Subject 47 shows signs of possession. Treatment failed. Next patient to be assimilated. That's when Noah realized we weren't just visitors to this building, we were the next subjects. Maybe our arrival had already been decided. I opened my eyes then, but according to Noah, they were completely white. No pupils, just white. And I was mumbling. I saw them inside the walls. They showed me who we are. I don't remember saying any of that. But Noah's face, in that moment, looked like he was seeing me for the first time, and maybe the last. Noah panicked and ran. The hallway had turned into a maze, hands reaching out from the walls, the floor sinking beneath his feet, rooms shrinking as if trying to trap him. But he kept running, focused on a glowing exit sign in the distance. When he finally reached the door and pushed it open, he was outside, but just a few steps ahead. The hospital stood again, right in front of him, like he had never left. He froze. Maybe that's when he understood. The building never let him go. The next morning, a hiking group found me unconscious near the edge of the woods. I had Noah's camera in my hands, but there wasn't a single file on it. I kept repeating the same words: "We didn't escape, it just let me go." The hospital? Nowhere to be found. Some said that place never existed, but I know better. It's still there, just hidden, only visible to some. Since that day, I've never seen Noah again. I never spoke about that place to anyone. Doctors put me in therapy, where I would often whisper Forest Hills without knowing why. One day my therapist asked me what it meant, and all I said was, "It watches through the trees." Now when people ask me where Noah is, I don't smile, and I don't cry. I just say one thing: maybe he's not a patient anymore. Maybe he's the doctor now, and maybe he's waiting for someone new. Since I was a kid, I've always been weirdly drawn to horror. But what I felt at Ravenswood Children's Hospital was more real and more terrifying than anything I've seen in movies or stories. That day, it was me, my cousin Emily, and our friend Chris standing in front of the abandoned hospital where the TikTok trend #HeStillBurns had gone viral. The challenge was simple: take a picture outside room 304 on the 3rd floor. But we weren't just chasing a trend, we wanted to know the truth. Emily was the most excited. She had gone down every Reddit thread she could find, reading stories about people feeling burning plastic smells, hearing children's laughter, and even getting a stinging sensation in their eyes outside that room. The hospital's history didn't make it any easier to ignore. Back in 1998, a fire broke out in the pediatric ward, killing 4 children. No one ever figured out how it started, and the doctors just disappeared. The creepiest part? When the fire was out, room 304's door had no nameplate. Just a burnt sign with charcoal writing, "Don't come back." We planned to arrive in broad daylight, since the place was far out on the edge of town, deep in a dried-out industrial zone, overgrown grass, broken-down power poles, rusted warehouses. The closer we got, the weirder it felt. Dogs barking nearby just suddenly went silent, and the air was strangely warm, like it still remembered the fire. Right at the gate, Emily pulled out her phone to record a TikTok clip, but the camera kept glitching, and her mic picked up static instead of her voice. We climbed in through a broken window, and as soon as we hit the first floor, dead silence. The walls were lined with faded posters, dusty old toys, and medical waste scattered across the floors like someone had hit pause on time. Chris found an old sketchbook near the reception desk, probably a kid's, but the drawings inside weren't what a 6-year-old should have been making. Twisted faces, burning hands, and one sentence written over and over: "He watches from the room, don't knock." As we climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, our flashlights started to dim, and the hallway filled with the nasty smell of burnt plastic mixed with damp rot that hit straight in the nose. Then Emily whispered, "Do you guys hear that?" And right then, our audio recorder picked up faint laughter, children's laughter, but there was no warmth in it. It was cold and wrong. We stood in front of room 304. The door was half open, like someone had peeked out and left it that way. Inside there was smoke, but no fire. Black handprints covered the walls. Wires hung from the ceiling. On the floor, burn marks formed the outline of a small body, leading straight to a bed, and stopping there, like a child had once lain there. Maybe still was. Emily stared inside, frozen. Her eyes widened. Then she whispered, "I can see them. The kids, they're holding my hands." Chris and I looked at each other. At first we thought she was joking, or maybe freaking out. But the blankness on her face said something else entirely. It was like she wasn't in control anymore, just standing there, motionless, like someone else was pulling the strings. Chris said quietly, "Emily, this isn't funny." But she didn't respond. I reached out to grab her wrist and pull her back, but just then slam. The door to room 304 shut hard right in front of us. The hallway fell silent again, but not in a peaceful way. It was wrong. In that moment, one thing hit me hard. This wasn't some TikTok trend. It wasn't a spooky story. It was real. Something was still inside that room. And maybe Emily wasn't completely with us anymore. The door to room 304 slammed shut behind us so hard it felt like the impact hit straight through our chests. We ran to grab the handle, but it was ice cold from the outside, while the room itself had turned into an oven. I could barely breathe. The air smelled like burning plastic mixed with smoke, and it felt like every breath was getting tighter in my chest. Emily had quietly walked to a corner of the room and sat down. Her eyes were shut, and she was mumbling in a soft, flat, almost childlike voice. "They're not dead. They're just hiding under the bed, waiting." Her tone had no emotion, just a flat, robotic whisper. Chris's flashlight hit a shattered mirror nearby, and he suddenly shouted, "Tyler, there's someone standing there." We rushed over, and he was shaking as he explained that he saw a tall man in a doctor's coat, holding a child in his arms. The figure's face was completely blurred out, standing silently in the hallway behind us, but when we turned around, no one was there. Just the door and pitch-black silence. Suddenly, our audio recorder began picking up strange reverse sounds like someone sobbing or screaming backward. Later, Chris reversed the file on his phone, and a broken child's voice came through, whispering, "Tell Mom I'm still burning." My heart dropped again. The walls were warming up, and the children's drawings on them started melting, the colors running down like even the walls couldn't hold in the pain anymore. Then I felt that someone lightly touched the back of my neck. I spun around, but Emily and Chris were feet away from me. I stepped toward the center of the room, shaken, and suddenly my foot hit something solid under the bed, a trapdoor, a small hidden hatch. We pried it open, and a narrow, pitch-black tunnel stared back at us. Cold air rushed out of it, completely opposite to the burning heat inside, like the meeting point of death and fire. Emily stood up suddenly. Her eyes were still blank and she stared straight at the hatch and whispered, "They're down there." Without fear or hesitation, she bent down and started crawling toward it. Chris and I pulled her back, but she kept repeating, "They said we have to stay. They chose us." Her voice sounded hollow, like she wasn't speaking for herself anymore, just repeating someone else's words. Then she looked down into the hatch and froze. "They're looking at me," she whispered. We both leaned in and saw them, 4 shadowy children hanging upside down from the ceiling. Their eyes glowed like embers, and they were smiling. One of them tilted its head and asked Emily in a soft, creepy voice, "Will you play with us?" After that, Emily stopped moving completely. Frozen, she didn't speak or blink. When we touched her, her skin felt ice cold, like her spirit had already left her body. That's when Chris and I knew we had to get out, no matter what. But when we opened the door, the hallway was different. The walls looked like charred wood now, and where the stairs used to be was just a black hole, bottomless and silent. The hospital had transformed into a living maze, shifting and changing every second. Emily spoke softly behind us. "We're not in Ravenswood anymore. They brought us where they died. And whatever happened after that, I don't even have the words. All I can say is, the fire in that room is still burning. And maybe we aren't the same people who went in there." When the 3 of us realized the hallway no longer looked the same as it did on the way up, it felt like the ground slipped out from under our feet. Every 5 minutes, the layout of Ravenswood Hospital kept shifting. Sometimes the stairs were on the left, then they vanished completely, like the building was breathing, trying to trap us deeper inside. Rooms began changing places on their own, and the walls no longer looked like wood. They looked like they were made of scorched embers. But the strangest change was in Emily. She wasn't the same Emily who came with us on this trip. Her voice had become soft and childlike, and she was humming nursery rhymes with a blank smile, "Ring around the rosy." Then suddenly whispering, 304 is my new home. They love me here." Her face didn't look innocent anymore. It was empty, without emotion. And in her eyes, I saw something I still can't explain. Like someone else was looking out from behind them. As we walked through the twisting hallway, I got separated from Chris. I took a turn, looked back, and he was gone. I heard his voice calling out, but it sounded far away, like it was echoing from rooms across the building. Then silence. Chris later told me the room he ended up in was completely blackened with soot, and the walls were covered in small red handprints, like children had pressed bloodied palms everywhere. That's when the lights went out. In the darkness he heard a whisper close to his ear, "He's next." Meanwhile, I was running frantically from one hallway to the next, trying to find Emily, but every corridor looked the same, yet somehow different. The oxygen masks hanging from the ceiling now looked like distorted children's faces. That's when I saw a shadow in the distance, Emily, holding hands with a tall doctor-like figure, walking together down the hallway. I shouted for her to stop, but my voice felt like it was swallowed by the air. It never reached her. The 2 of them disappeared into the darkness, and the hallway fell silent, except for the soft sound of children's laughter echoing faintly in the distance. To this day, I don't fully remember how I made it out. But when I finally checked the footage on my camera, I found something that still gives me chills. Emily was lying quietly on the burned bed in room 304, and standing around her were 4 shadowy figures, children, with scorched faces and no eyelids. One of them leaned into the camera and smiled. When we got out, it still didn't feel like everything was normal. A week later, Chris called me and said Emily was still with him, but she wasn't the same. Her eyes would follow things that weren't there, and she talked to herself like she was speaking to invisible kids. Sometimes she'd call herself Dr. Emily. Her bedroom window kept showing handprints, tiny ones, like from a child, and The smell of burning plastic would sometimes seep from the walls for no reason. I never heard any more news about that hospital, but 2 months later, a Reddit post mentioned Ravenswood was being renovated, and one construction worker claimed he saw a girl on the 3rd floor singing a nursery rhyme. But when he looked, again, no one was there. The creepiest part? When I rewatched Emily's last recorded video, where she was laughing in room 304, I noticed something standing behind her. That same blurry doctor figure, staring straight into the camera. And if you look closely, you can see his lips slowly moving, saying just one word: next. So guys, room 304 brings us to the end of tonight's 3rd and final story. But the fear? That might not end here. Maybe next time you pass by an old, abandoned hospital, you'll feel eyes watching you from behind a burned-out window. Or hear faint laughter coming from a room that should have been empty. And that's when you'll realize these stories weren't just stories. They were real. Tonight, we shared 3 bone-chilling, true tales. The lights were still on. The screams from Forest Hills and room 304. 3 terrifying and true abandoned hospital horror stories. If you love stories that steal your sleep, echo in your mind for hours, and make you look over your shoulder again and again, then make sure to subscribe to our channel, Chilling Talks. We bring you the scariest, truest, and most unsettling real-life horror stories, told in a style just like Mr. Nightmare, but in your own voice. Don't forget to like and share this video if you've ever felt something move behind the walls of a haunted hospital. And drop a comment below letting us know which of the 3 stories scared you the most. We'll be back with another true and terrifying tale very soon. Until then, because some stories never really end. This is Chilling Talks.